Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you like the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Navigating a Changing World, Supporting Our Dogs Through Vision and Hearing Loss. This webinar is sponsored by Your Dog's Friend, a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. Since 2006, we've been promoting the use of positive dog training methods by hosting free webinars just like this one and posting valuable resources on our website, offering affordable training classes and providing free advice and referrals. My name is Carrie Hoare and I'm a volunteer with Your Dog's Friend and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Our speaker today is Deb Bauer. Deb is the owner of Your Inner Dog with 35 years of experience teaching dogs and their people. One of her areas of expertise is working with deaf and blind dogs. Deb graduated from Karen Pryor Academy and has numerous other certifications, including Family Dog Mediator and Tellington T-Touch Practitioner. Deb is the author of several dog-related books and many articles, and we look forward to learning how we can help and support our dogs through vision and hearing loss. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit, so if you find this webinar useful, please consider making a donation to help support these free webinars and other free resources that we offer. If you'd like to donate, you can visit our website at yourdogsfriend.org. We really appreciate your support. So with that said, let's get started with today's webinar. Over to you, Deb.
Thank you, Carrie. All right. So as we get started here, most of us will have the experience of our dog losing their vision and or their hearing when they become seniors as just a natural part of that aging process. But I think it's often under-realized that hearing or vision loss can happen to our dogs at any age for a variety of reasons. And this can come along gradually or pretty suddenly. Some dogs might even be born with sensory differences. So the information I'm sharing today is applicable to all dogs, and I encourage you to be creative and tweak this information to best support your individual dog. Helping our dogs to continue to lead happy, joyful lives despite going through sensory changes is important, and it's something that I think sometimes gets overlooked. So let's dive in. First, just a little bit more about me and my amazing dogs that you can see here. I had the opportunity to meet and work with my very first blind and deaf dog 35 years ago, as I was just starting out my professional career with dogs. And it was just kind of by chance meeting, but it's something that I will always remember. And her name was Lady. And like my dogs, she had been both blind and deaf from birth. She lived with a group of other dogs. A lot of them were siblings or same age kind of dogs, together in a big outdoor enclosure. And to watch the group of them together, you really couldn't tell which dog was blind and deaf. Lady was just like all the other dogs. The only thing that made her stand out was her white coloring. Now, I was able to spend the whole summer with Lady, and during my lunchtime, I would get her out of the pen. We would just hang out. I taught her manners. I taught her how to be groomed. I taught her some fun tricks. I taught her how to play. It never occurred to me that she couldn't learn all the same things that other dogs could learn, and she fascinated me. And we very quickly became best friends. And I never forgot Lady, and I've been passionate about supporting blind and deaf dogs and their families ever since, and that's why we're here today. So these are my amazing dogs. The picture on the left shows Vinny. He's my 9-year-old rough-coated collie, and he was born both blind and deaf. He is my traveling buddy, my therapy dog partner, my dog sports partner. This picture shows us competing in our first canine freestyle show, and he is the love of my life. And if you're a dog person, you understand that. And then the picture on the right shows Delight, who is also born blind and deaf. She's a 2-year-old, what we're guessing is a Pomeranian mix. And she has been a really wonderful teacher for me as she lives her life with quite a few challenges. And so supporting her and being able to increase my knowledge even more about what she needs has given me the experience that now I'm able to pass along to other families who can benefit from it as well. Now, while we're here today to talk about how best to support our dogs through this transition, I think it's super important to recognize that these changes also affect us as the human. And I think that there's several stages that we go through when we learn that our dog is becoming blind or is becoming deaf. And I think that knowing that these stages are normal and that most everyone goes through them can help us to not feel so alone. So I want to just kind of briefly go through them first. The first stage is often grief and maybe even some overwhelm. We might feel sad when we think about all the things our dog loves to do, and we wonder if they'll still be able to do them with us and enjoy them. If our dog's gone blind and the way their eyes look has changed, or maybe they've had to have their eyes removed, we might miss the way our blind dog used to look at us. We can really grieve for the way things used to be and what we're going to miss, and that's perfectly normal. And grief is also something that most people experience as a variety of emotions, which might include anger or even guilt. So along with grief can come all of these other feelings. So we are obviously going to be concerned about our dog during this stage. How are they going to cope? Will they be happy? Will they live a full life? Our mind might be full of questions. And on top of all of this, depending on why our dog got the diagnosis that they did, they may need some extra medication or even physical care during this time, which can lead to us feeling a little overwhelmed or even exhausted. So it's really important during this stage that we're not only being gentle and compassionate with our dogs, but also with ourselves. Just be aware that this is a normal stage. There's much more to look forward to in the future, right? As we move through this stage, it's not the end of the road. There's still a lot that you can learn to do to support your dog and to bring kind of back that spark and that happiness for them. It might help to find someone you trust to talk to about your feelings. It might be a family member or a friend or even your dog's veterinarian. But expressing how we feel is often important to help us get through it. The next stage is that time when we're starting to gather knowledge about the best ways to support our dog. And as we learn more, then we start to feel motivated to try the things that we're learning. And it really feels empowering to be able to help the dogs that we love so much, to be able to do things that are going to improve their safety and improve their happiness. And so we can read books, we can check out blogs, we can find an online community where other people are living with blind dogs or deaf dogs who kind of understand what we're going through, right? They have probably gone through the same types of things. They have a lot of tips they can share, what worked for them. And so during this stage, you may feel like there's a lot to do. You got to set up your home, you got to set up your yard, you have to teach your dog new skills. You might have to introduce different types of enrichment and so on. But it's a different feeling than the overwhelm in the first stage, because now you're excited about being able to do these different things to help your dog. And then we begin to move into the third stage. And this is where we start to be able to find joy and celebrate our dog's accomplishments. We can enjoy watching our dog doing all the things that they used to love to do, but maybe in a different way. Or maybe we've taught them new things to do and we have new activities and things that we enjoy doing together. We believe that our dog's really going to be okay and that we are too. So all of these feelings, thoughts, and stages are perfectly normal. You might go through any of them. You might go through all of them. And sometimes you might cycle through them more than once. They're kind of fluid. There's not a defined start or stop to any of them. And often we might feel that we're in two at a time, or maybe even all of them at the same time. So just being aware and being understanding of ourselves as much as we would be for someone else who is going through this can really be helpful. Even though the dogs that I have here at my house have been born blind and deaf, I've also experienced dogs losing vision and hearing because they've gotten older, they're seniors. I've experienced just having a middle-aged dog who suddenly became blind as well. So I went through all the same stages. Even though I understand that blind dogs can live, perfectly happy, healthy lives, I still went through the grief. I still went through, okay, I can do this. I'm feeling empowered now. And then being able to celebrate my dog and what he was relearning to do in his life. Let's start with hearing loss. Sometimes hearing loss in our dogs can sneak up on us until one day we just realize maybe they're not hearing me as well as they once did. Or it can also come on pretty suddenly due to an injury or an infection. And hearing loss overall, I think, is often easier for dogs and their families to adapt to because our dogs are really good at watching us and the environment for clues as to what's going to happen next. It can almost seem like they're actually hearing things that they may not be because they're seeing and picking up these different cues and then responding the way they would have when they could hear. Hearing loss is not all or nothing, and it can differ from ear to ear. So the reason that I tell you that is sometimes it will appear that maybe your dog didn't hear something and then, oh, wait, you try to test it out. And then, oh, yeah, they heard it. And so as their hearing is changing, we might notice an inconsistency. They might have a full loss of hearing. They might have just a tiny loss of hearing or anything in between. And they might have one ear at a different stage than the other ear. And I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute. So let's look at the slide. Here's some signs that you might notice that might mean that your dog's hearing is changing. So of course, not responding to sounds, but it may not be that they're just not responding. It might be that it takes them a little longer to respond. And this goes back to what I was just saying about maybe the hearing loss in their ears is at a different level for each ear, because our ears take in information, they take in sound in our left ear and in our right ear, and then that information goes to our brains to help us locate where the sound is coming from and pinpoint what that sound is. So if that information is not getting in as accurately to your dog's ears, they might hear that there's a noise, their ears might perk up, they might recognize, hey, something's happening, but it might take them a little bit longer, so you might see a delayed response. Now, this might be your dog's in the yard and you open the door to call them to come in, and it just kind of takes them a little bit longer, or maybe they don't notice at all when they're facing the other direction. Maybe you have a dog that has always barked when the doorbell rings, and suddenly the doorbell is ringing and your dog's not really noticing. Or they might come running later to bark after you've already gone to the door to let somebody in. So no or delayed response to sound. It's important to take note of that. But there's also other behavior changes that you might notice. One being your dog might startle more often or more easily. So if you come into the room and your dog's facing the other direction and catches a little glimpse of you in their eye and they kind of jump, oh, I didn't know you were here. or if they startle more when they've been sleeping and they wake up kind of in a startle, that can be a sign that maybe their hearing is changing because they're not getting that advance notice that something's going to happen. Not being able to locate a sound. So that would be they hear it, but they're not quite sure what it is or where it came from. Sometimes we see them sleeping more soundly, or even more often spending more time sleeping. And we can sometimes think, oh, especially if it's a senior dog, oh, they're just getting older, they need more sleep. But sometimes it's just there aren't those noises coming into their awareness that are going to wake them up, so they just continue to sleep. Sometimes we think this is they're showing less interest in daily activities, but that may not really be the case. It may just be that they're not getting those advance notices like you picking up your keys. If they didn't see you pick up the keys and they don't hear you pick up the keys, they're not going to show an interest in going for a ride. Very often we see changes that involve dogs becoming a little grumpy with other animals in the home, especially sometimes with people, with children. They're not hearing them approaching until they're in their space. And then they get a little startled. And when they startle, they kind of get a little defensive, like, oh, what are you doing here? Do I need to be worried about this? So we can start to see a little bit of growling going on. We might see even some avoidance. We might see the dog just kind of getting up and leaving the room. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be bumped by you. And then the last one is just not meeting you at the door. If their routine is they know when your car pulls in the driveway, they meet you at the door, and suddenly they're not meeting you at the door, they may not be hearing your car coming into the driveway or even your key in the lock. So what can we do to help? The first thing we need to do is make sure that their physical safety is top priority, because they're also adjusting to this hearing loss. And if you have a dog that has been able to hear previously, and even if they have an amazing recall, you call their name, they spin around, they come racing back to you. If they're waiting for that recall, their name, to be their signal to come back to you, and they don't hear it, they're not going to come back to you. So they need to sort of relearn the communication that you're going to be using as well. And in the meantime, we don't want that deaf dog to be sneaking out of your fence or racing out the door when you go to let someone in or sign for a package. Because if they're facing away from you and running towards the street, perhaps, they're not going to hear you calling them to come back. So we want to make sure, check your fences, check your gate, make sure it latches. I like to have a separate barrier at my door. So just a little X pen around the door. You can just set it up just so that you can go in and you can go into the little space, and open the door and sign for your package. And your dog can be there, but can't get all the way to the door. That can be really, really helpful, especially in the beginning. I very often get the question of, well, can't my deaf dog ever be off leash again? And I answer this perhaps a little bit differently than some people would, because I look at it the same way as I would if I had a dog that could hear. And that is, not all dogs can safely be off leash in all situations. And so I always consider the environment. I always consider the dog and whether I've put in the practice to know that my dog's going to respond properly. And I personally don't like to take chances with my dogs and their safety. So I allow my dogs to be off leash in fenced areas. I love, at least here, in the United States, we have sniff spots. We have these fenced areas that we can take advantage of to let our dogs go have an off leash adventure with us. I love that. But I also use long lines, and this lets my dog have freedom to move around, to go sniff. My dogs move faster than me, so if I'm walking at my normal speed, they can be, zigzagging and sniffing all the things. And yet, if something happens, I know that I can quickly, get up to them and manage the situation to keep everybody safe. I do teach my deaf dogs an automatic check-in. That means that without me asking them, they are going to turn their attention back to me periodically on their own. And usually my dogs do that about every, I don't know, 60 seconds. So about every minute. And it doesn't have to be that they are coming to me. They're just kind of glancing in my direction to see what I'm doing. And in the beginning, I teach that by every time they look at me, they get this yummy treat so they learn, hey, I'm just going to keep looking, keep checking in. And then it becomes a little more real life. But the reason I teach this check-in is if my deaf dog is not looking at me, I can't communicate with him. And I can't give him that signal to come to me. So I teach them this check-in so that even if they're off running around, we're in a fenced yard or on a fenced trail like a sniff spot, and they look at me, I can quick give that signal, hey, come to me, and they'll see it because they were glancing at me. So check-ins are really, really important to reinforce with our deaf dogs. As far as adapting communication, hand signals, our dogs probably, if they're becoming deaf later in life, they kind of already know how to read your body language and hand signals that you might use anyway. Even your facial expressions. I had one deaf dog that if I just simply wiggled an eyebrow a little bit, she thought the chase game is about to start. And I had to be really careful because I'm not always aware of when I wiggle my eyebrow. And so sometimes she would notice something that I wasn't aware I was doing, and she would take off running in a big circle wanting me to chase her. I mentioned I use a long line. I use a leash wiggle to get attention also. So if my dog is at the end of the long line and I do need their attention, maybe they checked in, but I was too late with my hand signal, or there's something coming and I want to get their attention, I can just take up the slack a little bit in the leash and just give a little wiggle. This is not a yank on the leash. It's just a little, hey, just like if you were to grab somebody's sleeve and just give a little bit of a wiggle. And I teach that the same way that I teach the check-in. So instead of the dog looking at me gets the treat, the leash wiggle means the treat's coming. And pretty soon, when they feel that leash wiggle, they're going to be looking right back at you like, hey, that means my treat's coming. There are some things that we want to do to minimize surprises. If you've ever been startled, it's not a particularly pleasant experience. You get startled by something, you sort of jump, you hold your breath, you kind of gasp. And then in the moment afterwards, you can feel that adrenaline pumping, can't you? You can feel your heart is racing and you feel like a little jittery. Our dogs feel the same thing. And so every time they get startled, this is like a jolt to their nervous system. And it puts them in a little bit of, if you're familiar with the fight or flight, right? It puts them kind of on the defensive, like, oh my gosh, what was that? What do I need to do? And if they're startling over and over and over again throughout the day, they're going to become a little bit maybe anxious about what's happening around them, or hypervigilant that they need to always be paying attention because something might be coming to startle them. So we want to minimize that as much as we can. Also, putting some predictability into their life if they are a little bit anxious, especially setting up routines, like a routine for when you leave the house so that they know that you're leaving, they're going to be home for a while, so that they don't have to guess. They know what's coming. That will help them to feel safe. And allow yourself some more time. With my own dogs, when they start losing their hearing, as they're getting older, I sometimes find myself getting a little frustrated. And I jump into oh my gosh, they're not listening. And so I call them again and I call them again and my voice gets louder. Well, that doesn't help if they can't hear my voice. So I need to stop and remember that my dog is adjusting to this too. And they need to learn new ways of relating to me, just the same way that I have to learn those new ways of relating to them. So if I'm running late in the morning and I go to the door and I need my dog to come in so that I can, take off for work, and they're at the other end of the yard and they're smelling something really wonderful and I'm getting frustrated because they're not coming to me, that's not helping anybody. But allowing myself the extra time that if I need to go out, tap him a little bit, say, hey, come on, we're going in, at least in the beginning, allowing a little more time for these things in our routine, it can just make things more pleasant for us and for our dogs. The picture here, this is Vegas. He was born deaf, and he's the one I was talking about. He became blind when he was just 6 years old. So we had quite an adjustment. I went through all those stages in the beginning that I just talked to you about. All right, let's talk a little bit more about predictability and helping our dogs to feel safe and how we can do that with a deaf dog. We want to approach where they can see us. So instead of coming up behind them where we might be in a blind spot and suddenly touching them, if you can just step over a little bit so that you're approaching them from the side or even from the front so that they can see you coming, that will help to reduce that startle. Same thing with our hands. If they can't see our hand coming and suddenly it touches them, it's going to be a little startling. They're not going to know where that hand came from or what it's doing. So if I have a leash in my hand, for instance, and I want to snap it onto the back of my dog's harness, it might be easy for me to try to reach and do that when they're facing the other way, but that could be really surprising for my dog who didn't hear me back there behind them. So making sure they can see the hand that has the brush or the hand that has the leash that's coming towards them, just so that they have a chance to say, yep, I know what's going to happen. And then they can feel safe about it. I try not to wake up my dogs unnecessarily, but especially with my blind and deaf dogs, because I want to reduce the startle. I try not to, if they're sleeping, I try not to wake them up. I just let them sleep. But there are times that I do have to wake them up. Ironically, usually I have to wake them up at bedtime to take them outside for their last, business trip. And so usually they're sleeping pretty soundly, and I have to wake them up. So there are some gentle ways that we can do that. One is you can take a yummy treat that smells really good and put it in front of their nose. Some dogs will wake up when you do that. Not all of them, but some of them will. One of my favorites is if my dog's laying on a dog bed or on a blanket, or even on, the sofa, I can gently wiggle the surface that they are laying on. So I might pick up the edge of the dog bed and just give a little tiny wiggle. And usually their eye will pop open like, yes, can I help you? And for my blind and deaf dogs, I often blow on them. And so I can blow gently on, around their face or around their ears, where it might kind of just move the hair around their ears a little bit, enough that they can feel it and they'll wake up. Our dogs can feel a fly land on them, which I think is amazing, on their hair. So we don't have to be, super intense about how we wake them up. We also want to be sure that other animals and children especially are not constantly going past or into the areas that our deaf dog likes to rest, because it's really important that our dogs get plenty of rest and uninterrupted sleep, and they're not going to sleep if they don't feel safe. So if you already know where your deaf dog likes to hang out and you notice them there resting, if you can try to keep other animals who aren't already there from entering, from bumping into the dog, the deaf dog, that can be helpful. And if it's a place that your deaf dog always lays, like they have one spot on the sofa, right, that they always like to lay, maybe we can talk to the children about when Fido is laying on the couch, we don't touch him, we don't get on the couch without a parent there, just to protect our dog from from being startled and feeling defensive, because we don't want any behaviors such as growling to crop up. And then I have a couple other scenarios here that I do things a little bit differently, perhaps with my deaf dogs. And one is if I'm inviting a guest into the house. Now, I live with multiple dogs, so usually if one dog knows someone's at the door, all the other dogs, including the deaf dog, come following. But there have been situations where someone has come to the door, my deaf dog didn't realize it, I went to the door and let them in, and suddenly my deaf dog walks into the room and is like, whoa, this whole other person has just, arrived in my home that I knew nothing about. And for some dogs, that can be a little worrying or a little startling, can make them be like, hey, what are you doing here in my house? So setting up a routine that you always do every time you invite someone in. If your deaf dog is there with you, obviously they can see that person coming in, you introduce them, that's all good. But if your dog's not in the room and you're inviting someone in, you need to be sure that you are taking the time to then go find your deaf dog and bring them and introduce them to whoever's there, so that it's not just like a surprise that they're finding, just by chance. And the other one is when I leave the house. So if I'm just leaving the room, if my, Vinny's over here sleeping, if I wanted to leave the room, I feel okay doing that. This isn't a new house for him. He knows the places he can find me. He'll come check the bathroom. He'll come check the refrigerator. He'll come check the computer or my favorite chair on the couch until he finds me. So that doesn't bother me too much about just leaving the room. But if I'm leaving the house, I don't want to try to sneak out on him, because I don't want, him to wake up and then be in a panic because he's searching the house and he can't find me anywhere. But he also knows our routines. So he knows that when I leave the house, I'll be gone for a little while, he can relax, and I will come back. So I just make sure I do wake him up if he's sleeping and I need to leave the house for any period of time, just so that he knows that I'm leaving. He can go right back to sleep, but I just want him to know and feel safe when he wakes up and I'm not there. All right, I'm going to move on. Now we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about when our dogs lose their vision. And there's very often much more of a learning curve and a transition period for dogs and for people when they're losing vision versus when they are losing hearing. And just like hearing loss, vision loss can happen gradually, or it can happen suddenly. And it's also not an all or nothing. It's not you can see perfectly or you can't see anything at all. You might have a slight visual impairment. You might have total vision loss. You might have anything in between. And you can have a difference from one eye to the other. So there's a lot of variability here. But some of the signs that you might notice, one of the first ones is you might notice that your dog's either avoiding things that they used to do, or maybe is still trying to do them, but is hesitating. And you can tell that, yeah, they sort of want to do that, but they're just not really sure. They might be doing like a little stutter step, at the bottom of the stairs, like, yeah, I want to go up, but I'm just not sure. And some of that can be the changes in vision causing differences in the way they see height, right? And depth perception. So going up or down stairs or a curb can look very different when you're starting to lose your vision than it did before. And it can look a little scary because you might not be able to tell where that step is that you're going to put your foot on, and then you just don't feel as safe. Same thing for getting in and out of the car or on and off of furniture. So if you notice anything changing, your dog used to do this fine and now they're hesitating or they really don't want to do it, that could be a sign that something's going on. Also, especially if you've lived with this dog for a while and they're very well versed about getting around your home and You know, they're very polite about their body. They don't usually run into you or run into other things. And suddenly they start knocking things off the coffee table, or they go to run out the door into the yard and they miss and they hit the door frame on their way out. Or maybe they just seem like they've lost their way and they seem a little disoriented. All of those can be signs that maybe they're seeing things differently. We often see behavior changes at those times of day when the light is changing. So for me, it's a little bit harder for me to drive at dusk than it is during the day or at night, just because the light starts to change. Doesn't mean I can't see, but that's the time of day that sometimes we see a dog's behavior starting to change. And also the times when they might be going from a bright environment to a dark environment. If they've been outside, excuse me, and it's really sunny, and then you invite them kind of to come into the house and it's shady in the house, they might hesitate a little bit, or they might try to rush through the door because they're not sure where that light dark kind of threshold is. Same way if they're going from a well-lit house out into the yard at night and it's really dark, we might start to see some changes around light and dark. You might notice that your dog's just showing a little bit of anxiety or maybe feeling a little clingy, especially if they are in an unfamiliar place with you or something different is happening that they can't predict. If they're not seeing the world properly, that can really cause some uncertainty. Again, here we might see dogs starting to growl when they're approached. And very often we start to see this with other animals in the home. And if you think about it, our dogs, especially, you know, dogs who live with other animals, and they might get along fine, there's no issue, but we take that for granted. They're communicating with each other all the time, all day long, underneath our radar, and that sort of keeps the peace. But when they suddenly can't see, they can't read the other dog's body language, they can't tell exactly how close they are. And so they start to become a little bit like, ooh, I'm not sure I want them here near me because I'm not sure what's going to happen. And so uncertainty can lead to a little bit of growling, like, hey, can you please just give me some space? And we also might see some startling more often when they're touched because they can't see that hand coming, right? And suddenly, boop, this hand is touching them, and that can be a little scary. There are some tools that can be helpful in helping our blind dogs to navigate safely. And the picture here shows Treasure, who was one of my Shelties, who was both blind and deaf. And she's wearing a version of a halo harness. Now, there are a number of different companies and brands that make these, but the gist is that there's a harness and then there's a flexible piece of tubing. You can see it there sticking out around the front of her chest, and it comes out farther than her nose and her face. So if she was going to run into something, that tubing would make contact first before she would smack her face on something. So it saves her face from being, you know, scuffed up a little bit, and it saves her from a what I imagine is probably not a very nice experience of just walking through space and suddenly having your nose scrunched against, you know, a wall or a piece of furniture. So they can be very helpful. I don't find them as helpful for dogs that are born blind, because those dogs just sort of learn as they grow, right? All puppies are born not being able to see, and then their eyes start to open, you know, at several weeks old, and they start to learn how to use their eyes. So a puppy that's born blind has already started, even in those first few weeks, learning how to navigate without their vision. So they usually don't need these kind of halo harnesses. But for dogs that are becoming blind or have suddenly become blind, they can be really helpful. as far as helping the dog have more confidence to move around. There are also all kinds of dog goggles. My favorite are rec specs. They seem to stay on the best, but they can protect your dog's eyes from being poked by things like branches or things within your home. Even if your dog is blind, you don't want something poking them in the eye and causing an infection or pain or anything like that. So protecting the eyes can be also very helpful. We just provide them with a little bit of gentle guidance in the beginning. Focus on the pathways that they need to know through the house to the places they need to go, their water bowl, their bed, their toy box, the door to the outside, and in the yard. How do they get from the door to their toileting area and back? And that's just what we start with. You know, we just start, can we help them map out these areas in a new way? They're learning how to use their senses in a new way. And I like to add in some navigational cues to that. So teaching them words for wait, like, wait a minute, there's something in front of you, just stop, step up, step down, go left, go right, go around. So if they do run it, you know, make contact with an obstacle, I can say go around, and they know, okay, it's something I can just walk around and keep going. Predictability is really important here too, in helping our dogs know what to expect. They can't see us reach to pick them up. They can't see us reach to give them a belly rub or to put their leash on or to use a brush, right? And so we need to tell them these things so they have a moment to prepare. So you can tell your dog, hop up before you pick them up. You can tell them you want to go for a walk before you put their leash on, and they will learn these little phrases, and they'll learn what to expect. You want to go for a walk means I'm going to put your leash on. So when they hear it, they're like, okay, I know what to expect. Someone's going to touch me at my collar or my harness and put my leash on, and we're going to go outside. So just giving them information about what's going to happen in their environment or what is happening in their environment that they can't pick up visually. One thing to be aware of is that they very often need more processing time. So for instance, if your dog has become blind and you are taking them out the front door to go for a walk, you can come out the front door, you can take a quick glance around, you know what the weather is, which neighbor is out, is the bus coming, you know, the school bus coming down the street, is the neighbor walking fluffy, right? You can tell all these things just at a moment's glance without thinking anything of it. But your dog needs time, especially in the beginning when they've just become blind. They're learning how to use their other senses to pick up things that their vision would have picked up. So they need just more time. So step out the door and just let them have a sniff, let them sniff the air, let them just be until you see that they're ready to go on. It's important to keep them mentally stimulated because what we don't use, we lose, right? And so think of all the things you see during a day. It's overwhelming, but everything that you see gives a little bit of input into the brain. And so when your dog doesn't have that visual input anymore, we need to provide input in other ways using their other senses. So stepping up some enrichment, lots of sniff walks, things like that, that are going to provide that stimulation in their day. And sometimes when our dogs become blind, they have a hard time with the difference between night and day. So especially if you're gone at work all day and your dog's just sleeping away, not a care in the world, but you come home, they're up, they want to be involved, and then you want to go to sleep, but they're still on daytime, right, in their mind. So having a very clear bedtime routine. This is what we do every night at bedtime. It means we're going to sleep for, you know, however long you sleep, 8 hours, can be very helpful in just helping them know the difference, and then providing more mental stimulation during the day is helpful in that. I just want to look at these very quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but things that you can do to adjust your environment for safety for a blind dog. We want to remove as many obstacles from their path as we can. So, if you usually come in and, you kick off your shoes and they're laying kind of, around and blocking the front door, that's going to be a tripping hazard for your blind dog who wants to come to the door to let you know they need to go out. Cords are a big one. Make sure there aren't any cords that your dog can get tangled in, can pull something over on them, TV, floor lamps, things like that. One of my favorite things to do is just put a big potted plant or something like in front of a floor lamp, just so there's no way my dog's gonna go behind it or run into it or knock it over or get tangled in the cord. I like to use a raised water bowl. Some people with blind dogs will also use a water fountain because it has a little trickling noise so that their dog can find the water bowl easily. I haven't found that that's been necessary for my dogs, but they will sometimes step in the water as they're trying to locate the bowl. So having it in a raised feeder type thing can be really helpful because they can then feel it instead of having to try to find it with their foot and then water goes everywhere. Keeping your layout pretty consistent, your big furniture, keeping it, where it is for the most part. That's not to say you can't ever rearrange your house or that you can't take your dog to a new environment or you can't move. But if you do something like that and there's a new layout, your dog has to readjust and create, new mind maps of how to get around. So keeping things as consistent as you can will help them feel safe and moving around. And I put non-slip mats here, which is really important for any dog that's becoming a senior because we don't want them to slip. We don't want them to injure themselves, but also so important for blind dogs because they navigate through what they feel at the bottom of their feet, through their pads. And so we can use different surfaces. They do need to be non-slip because if your dog steps on it and it slips, they're going to be afraid, probably from then on, right? So non-slip. But we can put different surfaces, a little mat at the top and the bottom of the stairs, for instance, to let our dog know you're at the top of the stairs, right? You need to start to feel for where the stair is. Having non-slip surfaces on our stairs is really important. We can use carpet runners to put through a large open space so that our dog can easily just walk through the kitchen, for example, in a straight line. It's really hard to walk straight if you can't see, because to go straight, you have to look at something and go towards it. So having that carpet runner as, here's just a nice path through this open room can really help a lot of dogs. Just very quickly about dogs that are both blind and deaf. We want to change our communication with them to include touch cues. So if I touch you here, it means this. If I touch you in this way, it means that. The same way we would teach different words or different hand signals, we can teach that different touches mean different things. I still use a leash wiggle. That's something easy that a blind and deaf dog can feel. So for attention. But I do have a variety of different touches that I use. And it's still important to let our dog know what's going to happen, right? Because they can't see or hear the cues of what we're going to do. So reaching for them to put the leash on, for instance, I like to have a specific cue that says, hey, something's going to happen. Someone's going to touch you. I also let them sniff whatever the thing is. So if I'm going to put a leash on, I just hold the leash in front of Vinny's nose. He sniffs it. He knows exactly that's my leash. We're going to go do whatever. And he has 3 different leashes and they're all kept in the same place, but he knows the difference in smell. So we have his long line leash. That means he's going on a, adventure. We have his regular going in the car or going for a walk leash, and we have his therapy dog leash. And I can tell that he knows the difference based on his behavior when he smells them. I keep the routines as much as I can. And that doesn't mean that I have to feed at, always at 7 or 5 or, whatever. Routine is sort of, I know what's coming next. So I have little routines like around leaving the house. Here's what we do when I leave the house and I'm going to be gone for a while. So as soon as I do that routine, he knows what's coming next. We have a bedtime routine. Every night at bedtime, here's what we do in this order, and he knows. And as soon as the routine ends, he's already laying on his bed ready to sleep. So allowing them to have that predictability is going to help them to feel safe. Again, always using a fence or a long line. And I always advocate for my dogs. So I don't let someone that I meet on a walk just reach out and touch my dog. I have a little routine around that. So I have a little, okay, Vinny, somebody's here. Would you like to come meet them? He comes and sniffs the person. Then I tell the person, yes, you can touch. Because I want him to always feel safe. And if I'm out walking and people are just, oh, look at the cute dog, and they're doing a drive-by petting, I'm not sure that he's going to like that. So if he gets a lot of those pets that he doesn't like, or he's not expecting, or he gets startled by, suddenly the world starts to become not as safe as a place for him. That is a little picture of baby Vinny. He's pretty cute. A big question that I always get with blind dogs is, what kind of quality of life are they going to have? And my answer to that is, our dogs rely on us for everything. So the quality of life that they're going to have, for the most part, comes down to us and what we can provide for them. There will always be those things like, pain that we can't manage, or health conditions that just make life really hard for our dogs, right? And those are obviously going to affect quality of life. But there's so much that we can bring to their lives that will exponentially improve their quality of life. Enrichment, 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 play, all the things that they used to like, we can probably find ways to adapt them, right? If your dog likes car rides, keep going for car rides. If your dog likes sniff walks, keep going for sniff walks. If your dog's losing their mobility, if it's a senior dog, they're losing their mobility, they can still go for a car ride to their favorite park and have a picnic with you. Or if it's a small dog, they can ride in a stroller to get to the park, and then you can take them out and let them have a sniff, so they can still enjoy what they used to enjoy, but not with, they don't have to do the whole walk to get there if that's hard for them. Nose work, scent work games, whether you're doing it to find a scent or you're just doing it to find little pieces of their treats and their dinner. Great for dogs, great for keeping their brains active and enriched. Create a sensory garden. I always say, use whatever senses they have, right? So if they can hear, what kinds of noises can you bring in? We don't want to scare them, but what kinds of things can you bring in that will just be new and different? Different kinds of music. Bird songs. I was amazed that one of my blind dogs that could hear really liked bird songs. Different surfaces, different textures, things that might be new or unexpected, bringing in pine cones, from a different park that your dog doesn't usually go to. Bring them home and put them in the yard for him to discover. So we are the ones that are responsible for most of our dogs' quality of life. And the more we can do for them, the better quality of life they're going to have. Just some last things here to consider is, anytime behavior changes, it's important to go to the veterinarian. Some of the things that I talked about today, about signs that we might see, they can also be signs that there's something else going on for our dog, that maybe they have some pain or some discomfort or some cognitive decline, right? So It's always important not just to assume, hey, my dog's just getting older, and so, they're slowing down and maybe they don't see or hear as well as they used to. It's important to get it checked out because some of the things that can cause vision loss, especially, but even sometimes hearing loss, if we catch them early, they can be treated. If it's an ear infection and your dog's starting to not hear very well, and we catch it early, we can treat it before any permanent damage is done. Maybe your dog can regain their hearing. There are a number of conditions where if we catch it early enough and are treating it, we can slow the progression of blindness. But we have to be sure that we are getting our dog that diagnosis that they need so that we know what we're dealing with. Our emotions are huge with our dogs, and we know that how we feel, and if we are stressed or if we are worried, like, that causes changes in our dogs too, because they're so in tune with us. So just a reminder that, it's okay to find somebody to talk to about this. And if you find another dog person, they're going to understand. There are resources out there. And let's always remember things from our dog's perspective. So when we start to see things like fear or confusion or anxiety, and we think, oh, well, there's nothing here for them to be worried about. Like, they're safe. I don't understand why it's taking them so long to adjust. We have to look at it from their perspective. Just because we set up the home and the yard and everything to be as safe and easy for our dog as possible, it doesn't mean that they are actually feeling safe. So taking some of these things we talked about today, creating predictability, letting them know what's coming, what to expect, all of those things are going to be helpful for how your dog feels about this change. And most dogs are really adaptable. They will adapt pretty quickly, but some dogs take longer than others. And you might notice that they're going to need a little bit more from you. They're feeling a little vulnerable. And I think that maybe that's the same. I can say that I'm getting a little bit older. But I see that in humans too. As we get older, as our abilities start to change, we feel a little bit more vulnerable. We're not as eager to jump into things and do things that we might have before. We kind of stop and consider, am I going to be able to get up off the floor after this? And so those same things are going on for our dogs, and they really need us to help them feel safe and confident and happy. So this is what I have to offer. I am always available to talk to people, to answer questions, to help, just give them a safe place, a safe someone to talk to who understands. And these are my resources. I have a blog. I have a lot of online classes, but also some freebies. And if you follow the QR code, it'll take you to my website and my blind and deaf dog resources page. And of course, here are my smiling kids. So thank you so much. That's all I have today. And I hope you have some good questions.
That was fantastic, Deb. Yeah, there are other questions in the chat.
Oh, good.
We have one from Adiba. She has a Sheba, a 14-year-old rescue who is blind in one eye from abuse pre-rescue. She's now deaf also, and she's a therapy dog, has a lot of training with both verbal and hand signals.
Okay.
What she's wondering is when she's out on walks, how does she now go about best getting her dog to leave things alone when she can't hear or see her? She's now using a gentle tug on the leash when she's in harness, but is there a better way?
Great question. And one thing I would say is if she has any vision in that other eye, that you might want to start to go ahead and teach some touch signals now, just so that if that other eye does progress, it won't be as hard, right? Because you'll already have taught also some touch cues. But I love the leash wiggle. And so the way I do that is I just wiggle the leash, give a treat. Wiggle the leash, give a treat. And I start it when there's nothing too distracting, right? And then I sort of step it up a little bit. So if you have a treat that she really loves, you may be able to teach that. And then in the moment when she's kind of going for whatever it is, right? Leash wiggle. And she's going to think, wait, there's my favorite, whatever, pizza or whatever you want to carry with you. So you could teach that a touch on the side means to turn and look at you. Just thinking about things that you can use the senses that she already has.
One from Wendy, which is really good and relevant right after following this question. Do you have any examples of helpful hand signals or facial expressions, or I would say touch cues, that she might start using with her dog? I know he'd get walk or are you hungry, but what about more detailed conversations like, did you know you're my best buddy? Maybe this is a good belly rub session and I'm making too much out of it.
I always talk to my deaf dogs and I talk to them in sentences as if they can understand. And I do believe that they can understand the intention behind it, because we as humans, we like to talk with our hands and talk with our body and talk with our facial expressions, right? So I'm sure that as you're saying, did you know you're my best buddy, right? That your body and your smile and your eyes, I'm sure that he's picking up the intention behind that. But one of the things that I like to do is I like to search online for different hand signals. I do know a little bit of sign language, but there are some things that I do look up, and then I figure out, so how can I adapt that so I can easily do it? So for my dogs, they know I love you. They know just the simple, I don't know if you can see that, but just the simple I love you. Eat, we're just putting something in our mouth is eat. Then I use basic, like regular dog training signals a lot of times too. So this is a signal for sit in sign language, but for me, it's much easier to just do sit like we would, in like an obedience type hand signal situation. If you go to that resource page, I have videos of touch signals that I use with my dogs, some common ones, but they are usually based on sign language as well. So for instance, one that I just used yesterday, this is Zoom Puppy. He helps me teach. So for my blind and deaf dogs, I use a touch cue for we're going in the car, right? So that he knows that when I put his leash on in the house, whether we're going on a walk, which is just my fingers walking on his side, or we're going in the car. Now for the car, I make a steering wheel, but I have to make it so he can feel it, right? So I start on one shoulder and I go up over and I come back. And that's my steering wheel. So that lets him know, that we're going in the car. And that's just something I created that makes sense to me, right? So that I remember car is steering wheel. But you can make up anything that you want as long as you're consistent.
Excellent. And let's see, Christy says, I'm in the process of adopting an amazing 6-year-old double merle Sheltie who is mostly deaf, may be able to hear some tones. She has vision though. I do think it may be exotropic, opposite of being cross-eyed, in one or both eyes. She's quickly figured out how to come up the deck steps on her own. How can she help teach her how to safely go down them?
Great question. So going down can be harder if they have any visual impairment because of the depth perception. Going up, they can easily feel, if they get close to the step, they can easily feel with their front legs or their chest how tall it is to step up. But if they're going to step down, they very often, especially for these smaller dogs, may not be able to reach all the way down to feel where that step is. right, before they commit to it.
Mhm.
So I like to sit down on the step next to my dog. I do like for them to wear a harness so that I can hold this top strap, not to pull them in any way, because if you try to pull them, it's going to be harder because they're going to be scared. But just to offer support so that if they do feel like they're a little off balance, I've got their back, literally got their back. So I sit next to my dog on the stairs, and then I bump my bottom down so that my legs are where are across the stair. It's hard to tell you here in words, but that means that they're not stepping down as far. They're stepping down onto my lap. And so that can give them confidence. They step into my lap, then I move my legs over and help them be on the step. And then I bump my bottom down again and I move my leg and they come down to my leg. And then I can move my leg out of the way. So they're just coming down on their own. And then I can start to walk next to them holding the harness. And in this case, you may want to have a touch cue. If she can see a hand signal, that could work. But my touch cue for going down the stairs is just a double tap under the chest here. And what that does is it gets them kind of looking down, like, okay, there's something down there, and they can find the edge of the stair, and come down. So that's my favorite way with big or little dogs is I'm just going to sit next to you here on the stair. We're just going to take our time. And, they're only going to proceed when they feel safe. So just helping them feel safe as best I can. And if you have the opportunity to use just a short flight of stairs, if there's anywhere that you know of where there's like maybe just 2 steps, right? Or you can even start on a curb and just do the one step until they become comfortable, and then go to 2 and then go to 3. And with a little dog, I don't know, Shelties can be small enough to pick up or they can be oversized. So if it's a dog you can easily pick up and they're comfortable with that, you can pick them up and place them gently on the stair so that there's only one stair to come down till they get to the ground, right? And then back them up so they're doing 2 steps to get to the ground.
Excellent. Let's see. Wendy asks, do hard of hearing dogs have a certain pitch that they can hear better? For example, when my dad was losing his hearing test showed he could hear a deeper tone better. I know Lucky is losing his hearing, but now wants to go outside when I play the piano.
I don't know that there's a specific answer for that because hearing and vision loss are so individual. So I don't know that there is an answer for that. I'm not sure if that's something that a bear test would be able to pick up or not. And from my knowledge, a bear test, which is they like connect little electrodes to see whether your dog can hear or not, only pick up whether there is vibration or there's not. But that may have changed. I mean, technology is growing by leaps and bounds, but it's not an answer that I can give you.
Let's see. Dawn asks, my 9-year-old Westie has diabetes and the vet told me to expect her to lose her sight. I have 2 other dogs. Do the other dogs know something is happening with the Westie?
Yes, but maybe not in the way that we as humans would expect. So obviously, if things are changing, right? If one dog's behavior is changing or how they respond to things is changing, your other dogs are going to notice. But whether they actually know that your dog's losing their vision, I'm not sure that's something that we really can know. But what they will notice is that your Westie's not responding to their signals, perhaps in the same way. And so we often need to step in and help because we don't want disagreements to start. It's very common for a dog that's losing their vision or is blind to not be able to tell depth perception very well. So they may be approaching one of your other dogs and bump into them, right? Or step on them. Even if that Westie still has some vision, not meaning to be rude, but in dog language, if you're bumped into and you've asked politely with some subtle signal, hey, can you give me some space, and you get stepped on, right? That's considered kind of rude. So we do have to help in the beginning. And when we notice that our other dogs are giving signals like, hey, can you back off a little bit? We need to help and just steer our dog away, right? And just, and they do adjust. You know, I've lived with, in multi-dog home now for, you know, my whole adult life. Most of that time I've had blind and or deaf dogs, and they can adjust, but it takes time because just like we are learning a new way to communicate with our blind or deaf dog, right? So are the other animals in the home. And our blind or deaf dog is learning a whole new way of communicating as well. So just being sure that we're protecting them and we're giving everybody the space that they need. Very often we want to think that our dogs are going to step up and help the blind dog, you know, and lead them around and things like that. And it does happen, but it usually doesn't happen. So it's sort of a fairy tale we have in our head. And I've seen it happen. And when it happens, it is just truly amazing. But when we expect it to happen and we expect our dogs to understand, then we can run into trouble and we can get, you know, disagreements happening and squabbles happening. And that's it's hard to fix once it starts. So just being aware that they need to learn, you know, a whole new dynamic and a whole new way of communicating as well.
Kind of off topic, but since we've got a few minutes, Terry says, speaking of the piano, my GSD howls when I play. Is there any way to accustom him to it?
As someone who plays the piano, yes, I can sympathize. I want to say maybe. Like, we can certainly always take steps to help our dogs acclimate to things, but we also have no idea what our dogs are sensing, right? And so if the howl is stemming from just, you know, something is triggering inside the brain, you know, like dogs howl together, right? And they howl if there's a siren sometimes, or if they hear a wolf howling. There may or may not be things that we can do that will completely ease that. But I would say if you thought about the behavior that you wanted your dog to do instead and taught that away from the piano playing, and then set up a, you know, program for desensitizing where you might do a recording of you playing the piano and start, you know, way at a distance, very soft, just a very short snippet while your dog's doing things they enjoy, and build up and then put it together with that behavior. Like, let's say you want her to just hang out on her bed and chew her bone, or, you know, whatever it is. And in the meantime, when you play the piano, have her in another area of the house. Him, sorry.
Yeah, she mentions he's got some hearing issues.
Ah,
Along with it, she added that on. So.
You know, this just came to mind is I've also done a lot of work with assistance dogs. And when they're in a loud environment, there's something called like mutt muffs that you can accustom them to wearing. This isn't something that you just slap on them and expect them to be happy wearing it, but it can muffle the sound. And so very often assistance dogs that go to, you know, concerts or live sporting events, car races, things like that, we want to protect their hearing. So we can accustom them to wearing something like that. So that might be something else that you might look into.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. And Rex Specs, I think, also makes a brand of those
They
earmuffs.
do. I can't remember the name of it.
So I've got a couple of questions. Do you ever use scent to mark walls or furniture to help dogs figure out where they are?
Super, super question. I know that there are people that do and have had success with it. I don't, and I don't necessarily recommend it. Because I do a lot of work with scent, I know that scent doesn't stay where we put it. So if you've ever walked into a school or a church and you smelled somebody's, really strong perfume, it could be from somebody, sitting across the aisle, 3 rows up,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't stay. So if we put a dab of vanilla on something, pretty soon the whole room, the whole next 2 rooms, right, are going to smell like vanilla to us. And our dogs have a much better sense of smell that we don't fully understand yet. So I tend not to. But like I said earlier about Vinny and his 3 leashes, if I was to smell those 3 leashes with my eyes closed, I wouldn't be able to tell any difference. But
Yeah.
he knows immediately, even though they're kept in the same place. Same thing with my grooming tools. They're all kept in a basket. And I let them smell each tool before I use it so that they know what to expect. And they can tell different brushes apart. And I can tell that because they like one brush and not the other.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they react differently.
Uh-huh.
So I usually don't recommend, putting smells on different things. The other thing about that is if you're using different smells, they all get mixed together. So it's something that I think is very well-meaning in the advice because we're searching for something that is going to help our dog and hey, they have a sense of smell. But in reality, I don't know that the dog is learning from the scents that are being added. Like my dogs already know the difference between the kitchen and how it smells. And, he knows he's getting close to the couch by the way it smells. So he's
Mhm.
already figured those things out. And if your dog is used to living in your home, they probably already know those things. So if they go blind and you start adding a bunch of different smells, it may or may not be more confusing. That's not to say people can't use it, but
Mhm.
I haven't found that it's necessary.
Yeah, and that it really does a better job than just the different textures, and the textures is a fantastic idea. So you hear a lot about using a vibration collar on a deaf dog to get their attention.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts on that?
How long do we have?
Yeah, that's not a short question, but I thought it would be a good question to ask because, I don't know how often the pet world hears it, but I hear it all the time.
I think they hear it a lot. Um,
What would be the pros and cons? Why would you not recommend it, or why would you recommend it?
I don't recommend them. I don't use them and I don't recommend them for the simple reason that I have seen the fallout of them. So some dogs, you introduce them to the vibration collar and they don't seem to have a concern about it. But other dogs find it very startling or very confusing because there's this thing, right, vibrating and there's no context, right? And
Right. Mhm.
they can't choose to take it off if it's bothering them. They can't. So because it's not a necessary tool, I don't use it or recommend it because I don't want to take the chance of somebody putting it on their dog and creating some anxiety or some reactivity. Those are some of the behaviors that I've seen sort of come about because if your dog feels the vibration and they're near children and they don't like the vibration, they're going to associate that with the children, right?
Mhm.
Or with the other dog or with the cat or whatever it is. And it's going to start to create an emotion, an emotional association with them. If you go to my blog, I have a couple blog posts that really dive into should I put a vibration collar on my deaf dog? And also the question of that I get is, can I use the vibration collar as a clicker? And so I've done some blog posts on those. But basically my premise is if it's not necessary and we can do the same things, which is get our dog's attention, and teach them to stop doing things. If we can do that without it, I would rather without it. Please go and look at the blog if that interests you.
Yeah.
And reach out because I'm always, if you want to talk about it more, I'm happy to do that.
Excellent. Christy asked, you have a good source for leashes that identify your dog as hearing or vision impaired?
I don't have one that I recommend, but I mean, there's a number of them. You can get things personalized, right? Bandanas and patches and leash sleeves and all kinds of things. They can be really helpful when you're out and you're, walking your dog, for people to give you a little more space or be a little more mindful. And there are a lot of people that use them, but I don't, and I don't have just a, specific company to recommend.
Yeah. I find too that with the ones that you can put on like a reactive dog or a nervous dog, you have to get pretty close to read what it says on there. And by the time, as you're getting closer and closer so you can read it, you're now too close to the dog.
Yeah.
So that can kind of cause fallout that you didn't want.
Very true.
Somebody says use a vest and a tag with a statement that the dog is deaf. And yeah, there's lots of sources for those.
I was just going to say, if you use a color, like there's the yellow ribbon movement, right? That's becoming more well known, in that dogs that need space wearing yellow, right? Having a yellow leash or having a ribbon on their leash, or, a yellow vest or something. So if the reason that you want to use that says I'm blind or I'm deaf, is to give your dog more space, choosing that bright yellow color can also be helpful.
Yeah, excellent. We'll wrap it up here, but again, if you guys do find you have questions, be sure and get a hold of Deb and check out her free resources and her blog. If you would like again to donate to Your Dog's Friend, please go to yourdogsfriend.org and click on the donate button. And thank you, Deb. This was absolutely fabulous. We so appreciate you offering all your wisdom.
You are very welcome. Thank you for everyone who came and who will watch the recording. And I look forward to you reaching out.
Yeah. So thank you again for joining us.